to. Karl Skala will be our speaker today. And since he is a candidate, we've asked them to each introduce themselves and then tell us why he's running for re-election. So Karl, you have the floor.
Well, I hope I won't take up the entire floor, and I hope you'll indulge me a little bit when I give you a bit of an introduction, because some of you know a bit about me, but I'll do it anyway. And in advance, I want to thank those folks that have contributed to my campaign. Many of the members here already have, and certainly I appreciate it very much. So let me get you started. I just have a few minutes worth. I'm glad that I don't have the 30-second stop sign and the stop sign and all the rest of that stuff. But let me just introduce myself. So first of all, thanks for inviting me to the Muleskinners Forum, of course. By way of introduction, I'm a Marine Corps veteran, a husband, a father of three, a grandfather of two, a four-term third ward city councilman, and the current Columbia Mayor Pro Tem. I've made Columbia my home for the past 42 years. I hold experimental psychology degrees from Southern Illinois University and the University of Missouri, where I retired from cross-disciplinary behavioral and biomedical research as a research core director in the School of Veterinary Medicine. I currently represent the City of Columbia on several panels for the National League of Cities, namely the Human Development Federal Advocacy Committee, the Race, Equity, and Leadership Council, the University Communities Council, and as a National League of Cities University Fellow. I am the recipient of 7 National League of Cities Leadership Excellence Awards. And last year, I was also honored to receive, as you know, the 2020 Columbia Boone County Muleskinners Margaret Morget Lifetime Achievement Award for, quote, his contributions to society and the Democratic Party, even though this race is nonpartisan. I am the past vice chair and 7-year member of the Columbia Planning and Zoning Commission, the past chair and 13-year member of the Columbia Boone County Environment and Energy Commission. I am also a 12-year member of the Columbia Chamber of Commerce and its Government Affairs Committee. I'm proud to say that I was the originator and have hosted bi-monthly Saturday morning coffee shop office hours for the past 14 years. My other interests include public radio. I have served on the board of the New Wave Radio Corporation and have weekly hosted KOPN's morning air program for the past 9 years. Travel, photography, singing with our church choir, and with the MU Choral Union are my other passions. As a 22-year public servant, a 12-year Columbia City Council veteran, and current Mayor Pro Tem, I represent leadership experience, institutional memory, continuity, community access, and real deliverables. And I'll leave it at that. And there are, I look forward, as usual, to a rigorous question and answer session. Let me just throw out a few things that I think you've probably thought about already. But I think the things to really talk about are the controversial issues that we face in this town, not the least of which, first on the list is trash, and we can talk about that. There is also homelessness is one of the big topics these days, topic du jour. So is ARPA funding, the COVID funding, and I can tell you a little bit about where the council is on all of that. And of course, the use tax, which is very important to the city. And Pam also reminded me, because in some of the comments that there are some other issues, obviously controversial issues that face the city, and those are the ones I think that we need to face and tackle head on. So I'm open to questions. Maybe I'll have a couple of minutes at the end to close, but I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Well, Karl, tell us more about the deliverables you're referring to, please.
All right, that goes back a long ways. There are probably 3 categories of those deliverables. My platform, in fact, has to do with public safety, roads, sidewalks, and streetlights, and neighborhood equity and integrity. And by public safety, let me add that by adding more officers and officer training to enhance our community policing vision, by providing for violence de-escalation personnel and enhanced mental health interventions, by providing funding for an additional fully staffed fire station number 10. With regard to road, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, with regard to roads, sidewalks, and streetlights, by advocating for a fair share of city funding for Third Ward roads, sidewalks, parks, and trails, with real results, enhanced street lighting that is energy efficient and is a relatively inexpensive neighborhood security solution. And finally, neighborhood equity and integrity. And what I mean by that is by implementing the neighborhood protections outlined in the city's comprehensive plan, Columbia Imagined, and guaranteed by the Unified Development Code, by creating Columbia's newest city department, diversity, equity, and inclusion, consistent with Columbia's strategic plan. And in terms of deliverables, it goes back quite a long ways. I've been on the city council now for about 12 years or so. So it can go back as far as the comprehensive plan and the visioning process. It can go into the Unified Development Code that I've been involved in. It even goes back in the environment in terms of setting up the first renewable portfolio that the city had, which we need to move on in terms of the current environmental situation and the commissions that are advising the city council. In terms of roads, there are broad categories of deliverables here. Roads include lots of roads in the Third Ward, of course, Mexico Gravel Road, the improvements on Clark Lane, the improvements on East Walnut, the improvements on Paris Road, for example. And there are another category of improvements and deliverables has to do with parks. And those parks go all the way from Stevens Lake Park, which is the jewel of the Third Ward, if you will, but also lots of minor parks, McKee Park and the Woodridge Park and several others that we have contributed to the playground equipment and the improvements to the parks in general. And then the last category of deliverables probably has to do with parks and with trails in particular. And the Hominy Branch Trail, which is a large trail that goes all the way from the northeast side here, all the way eventually to Stevens Lake Park, is the first trail in Missouri, actually, to go under the interstate highway to access the northeast side to the center of the city. And there are plans to enhance the connectivity further north, maybe along the Colt Railroad Trail and so on, and to the Bear Creek Trail as well, so that we can connect this system, have an integrated system to get around with other means of travel besides vehicles on the parks and trails. There is also something very exciting that I came across very recently, and that is there is a large tract of land that is being contemplated and there have been some promises made on the north side for a nature area on the north side of town that would be the equivalent of the nature area on the south side of town. I'm very excited about that. The I's are not all dotted and the T's are not all crossed, but it sounds like a major project coming in the near term. I hope that answers your question.
I have a question.
Sure.
Karl.
Yes.
Well, actually, it's kind of a statement. You heard me say this in front of City Council. I was there in front of City Council being opposing to the Canton Estates and was hearing about the move to try to do things for the homeless.
Yes.
I agree that there is a homeless problem, but maybe even a bigger problem affects many more people, and I think needs to be considered at the same time, is the fact of so many people having trouble having housing. They may have housing, but it may not be adequate or it may be very problematic.
Yes.
And the homeless tend to be males. The ones that are in some kind of shelter, but not well, but very circumstances that none of us would want to be in, are generally female and children. And I think that those need to be considered at the same time. anytime you try to address homeless.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there was a 13-page report released by the city manager in response to the emergency shelter at Wabash. But what it did was it described the city's efforts, not only in terms of the emergency shelter, but in terms of social services funding and homelessness in general. And one of the statistics that stood out to me was that in 2014, we were spending as a city about $68.2 thousand on homelessness, if you will. That budget is well over $300,000 now. It's quadrupled. And when you look at housing, there was another category of housing in it. We're talking about right now, and not only do we subsidize the care providers to a great degree in this community as well, with several $100,000. But when it comes to the issue of housing in particular, the housing budget beyond about $500,000 that we spend on an annual basis for subsidies for housing, and that includes some of the subsidies that we offer to the nonprofit sector, if you will. But we just at the last city council meeting approved a $2 million outlay for the CHA, the Housing Authority, with their McKinney Point project. And that is definitely going to address the immediate homeless problem, because we all know that the best way to deal with homelessness is to provide folks with a home of some sort, certainly. And and working very closely with Randy Cole and the Community Housing Authority has proven to be a very useful and practical way to deal with the city's issues regarding homelessness.
What I'm saying, when you say homeless there, are you also talking about people that have moved in with other people because
Yes.
they don't have a home?
Yes, it takes into consideration the entire spectrum of homelessness when it comes to the underserved or those folks that are challenged because of rent challenges and so on and so forth. So it will accommodate all of those kinds of folks, the entire spectrum.
David Mallory, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just got a quick procedural question, I guess, as far as mayor pro tem. Is that something that we elect on a ballot, or is it the mayor appoints him? How does that get filled?
It is an appointed position. I mean, obviously, in our form of government, we have kind of a weak mayor, strong city manager form of government. So the mayor himself or herself although has some ceremonial duties, obviously, and has some bully pulpit authority, if you will, and certain appointments and whatnot. The mayor pro tem is an appointed position by the mayor with the consent of the council. And usually that goes, not always, but usually that goes to the senior member of the city council, the one with the most seniority. And what that means is when the mayor is gone, I could possibly mount a coup in the city to take over his ceremonial duties and try and force legislation. That is probably not likely to happen, but essentially it's a backup to the mayor if he happens to be out of town or something like that. And it's an appointed position, but with the consent of the council. I've served as mayor pro tem, I think now for the past 3 years. Prior to that, I think Clyde Ruffin was the mayor pro tem for a year or so.
I guess we should point out that anyone can ask questions, even the press, any of our guests, anyone who's interested in you click down on reactions and click on raise hand, and that way you'll go to the top and our moderator will see you.
Just let me break into just to kind of prime the pump, if you folks need any priming. Let me offer some citywide priorities that I think a lot of folks ought to, or the candidates certainly ought to consider, certainly any city council members. It goes all the way from public safety and violence, obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion, affordable housing we mentioned, public transportation, homeless and mental health solutions, workforce development, climate change and renewables, green space acquisition, And last but not least, broadband access. And I've been experiencing some broadband difficulties these days by being kicked off of some of the Zoom meetings. And I suspect that perhaps some of you folks have as well. I serve on the broadband business planning task force, and we've been struggling to reconcile the public sector with the private sector when it comes to recommendations to the city council about increasing broadband availability, particularly to the underserved.
David Luthold?
I wanted to ask about trash. And
Yes.
are there any plans for changes? And is there support for having private developers or having private truckers in town? What is this? What do you see as the situation on trash pickup now?
Yeah, well, that's a long story, but let me try and make it as short and direct as possible. And that is, you know, we go all the way back to, I think it was 2016, 2015, 2016, when the initiative petition was filed to ban roll carts in this town. That passed by a margin of about 8 points, I think, at the time. And frankly, with some of the meetings that I held in my ward, if I would have voted for roll carts, I probably would still be swinging from a tree someplace in this ward, because there were 80 or 90% of the folks that did not want it. Now, both the mayor and I took the position when we revisited this idea about trash, because we had to change the system, because previously with trash bags, you could put as many trash bags out at the curb as you wanted to, and the day after you did that, they all disappeared. The only problem with that was that a lot of people were taking it, or some people were taking advantage of that and putting 20 or 30 bags, particularly some of the students when they were moving back home, and couches and mattresses and all kinds of things. And all of that stuff was going in the landfill, and solid waste collection was dealing with that. Well, we simply could not, that's not sustainable. We could not deal with that anymore. And we had to come to some sort of a new policy statement that was a pay-as-you-throw system. But we had to use the pay-as-you-throw system within the context of the ordinance that was on the books that banned roll carts. So we had to adapt the new trash system with the new trash bag system, so that we gave an allocation of bags to folks, but they could put as many bags out at the curb as they wanted to, but they would have to purchase the additional city bags if they wanted to. Unfortunately, the contract that we had with the company to do this has failed in some regards. They didn't deliver when it came to making sure that we had adequate supplies and all the rest of it. And you know the complaints, or you're probably aware of some of the complaints about the system the way it is right now. Meanwhile, the folks who want to go to roll carts have successfully garnered enough petition signatures, and they're being reviewed as we speak, to put this issue on ballot again to get rid of that ban. And my position has always been, I will do whatever the folks want, but I didn't want to disenfranchise the voters in 2016 by reversing that ordinance without permission from the new voters to find out if their minds have been changed, if they want to go in that direction. We're always going to have a hybrid system, because there are parts of this town that are not amenable to the automated equipment that we will need for roll carts. But it probably will be on the ballot, I would think, next November. I'm anticipating that. And so we will decide whether or not we want to continue with the system that we have, or we will have automated equipment. When it comes to the issue of privatizing, there are those folks that advocate for privatizing our trash collection system in the city of Columbia. I'm not one of them. I think the city can provide those services. We may have to go to roll carts, and I'm agnostic about whether we have roll carts or trash bags. Whatever the folks want, that's what we will do, and we will pay for it. When you privatize a system, as lots of you folks probably understand, you tend to lose control of the rate structure. It reminds me of Chicago when they decided to privatize the parking utility and they sold it to the Chinese. And now it's a real headache. They made $1 billion on the issue, but you do lose control of the rate structure. So my position is I'll do whatever the folks want when they vote on it, and I hope they do put it on a public referendum. We will accommodate that. But I'm not a big fan of privatization.
Sue and Herb?
Carl, as you know, I've greatly appreciated many of your stellar qualities, including your attention to detail, your pragmatism, but also, maybe more than anything else, you don't shy away from long-term thinking. What is your vision of Columbia in, say, 2040, 20 years from now, that helps to guide your decisions now, taking into account the long run?
You know, Herb, I think the thing that's the most important and then that has changed the most in the 22 years that I've been doing this, but the 12 years on the city council, is that politics has gotten so much coarser. We are the recipients of the national trend to eschew intellectual activity, facts. Everything seems to be a protest. We're kind of under, I wouldn't say we're under siege. Certainly the meeting decorum has been kind of violated. There are attacks not only at city council, but also on the school board and so on and so forth. That seems to be the soup du jour these days. It's very difficult because you can't make reasonable decisions when people are yelling at you, and you're not inclined to support some of those positions if folks are intentionally trying to marginalize themselves in front of a body that's everybody's trying to solve problems here. And some of these problems are intractable. If they weren't, we'd have solved them a long time ago. So I think one of the first things that we need to do is somehow not get back to the good old days, because the good old days are probably too simple to deal with some of the more complicated problems that we have right now, but at least attempt to approach the way that we dealt with problems like we did in the good old days. And that was everybody rolled up their sleeves. They gave the best advice that they could, and we tried to solve those kinds of problems. Some of the best compliments I've ever, a lot of this, I've got a very thick skin, and you can deal with a lot of insults and some of the yelling and screaming and so on. But the best compliments are from folks that have told me, I really don't agree with what you voted for. I really don't agree with what you said. But I do appreciate the fact that you dug into it, did some of the research, and came up with a rationale as to why you voted the way you did. And if there are even battles that are going on the dais within the city council meeting, and some of those things ought to be carried to individual conversations with the staff and so on and so forth. But it doesn't get us anywhere to be in public, to be dumping on the staff in front of the public. What we really need to do is try and gain some credibility by approaching some of these problems in a reasonable manner. And we've lost, frankly, a lot of ground when it comes to reasonableness. It's a real struggle sometimes.
Thank you.
Pam? And
I wanted to go back to trash. You made the comment that there are some areas of the city that are not amenable to the carts. Could you explain that?
Yes, a place like Benton Stevens, which is a place that's very important to me. The streets are so narrow and the traffic is so jam-packed in front of some of the houses that the large vehicles that would be necessary for side loading roll carts simply would not work in some of those areas.
Oh, okay.
And there are other areas, for example, with lots of elderly folks and so on, who just don't have the capacity for storage for roll carts, nor do they have the capacity to really deal with roll carts. they might be able to put out trash bags that weigh 25 pounds, even though they have a 50-pound limit. And maybe that's part of their social thing, to go get the mail and to put out their trash bags. And there are a lot of elderly people that call me all the time and say, they like trash bags for that very reason. I mean, it's their participation in being able to do something. They're a little bit worried about the roll carts and how big are they and where do they put them and what's going to happen. And so there is no perfect system here. There are drawbacks to both systems. Obviously, the bag system, there are extra costs, and the contract, the vendor was, there have been problems with that. There will be problems with roll carts as well. Their breakage and storage and cleaning, and whether they're left out in the street and so on. But to answer your question, there are places that automated equipment simply will not fit.
I see. Okay, thank you. I was not aware of that.
Scott, Crystal, and then I'm not sure if Maury or Nancy had their hands up first.
Alrighty, I was going to get back to about affordable housing. And this is going beyond just the homeless. This is covering, we'll say, the working middle class, and what can be done, if anything, for getting homes that would be affordable for folks like this, for the $100,000-$200,000 price range that some of these people would be able to qualify for. The other part of the question is your thoughts on what should happen with the Columbia Land Trust, which also addresses this issue.
That's right.
And take a second and explain it, what the land trust is and how it differs from CHA.
Sure. The land, let me start with the land trust. The land trust is an organization, if you will, or was an idea that the city adopted, whereby the city could invest some of the taxpayer funds that we have in purchasing property, purchasing land, and give the go-ahead to folks that would build the houses like Habitat for Humanity on top of some of that ground, and use the land as kind of a land bank to make sure, and put some rules in place to make sure that the housing that was developed on that property would benefit future generations of folks that were housing challenged, if you will. Now, the folks could make a bit of profit if they got one of these units, for example, that the city had partially subsidized. They could retain some value in their property and make a bit of a profit, and then move on to a larger house if that's what they wanted to do. But what was left behind was another opportunity for somebody to do the same thing. That is a way to continue to be able to pass along that subsidy that the city had for other people who were in need of housing. The idea of the land trust, now that it's matured to some degree, it's not a huge program, but it has been very successful. And the city has been talking about trying to turn it over to a nonprofit, if you will, another group to handle it, because it's kind of like the homeless problem. We have homeless shelters, but the city that's not it's not the city's best role to deal with the staffing and the security and everything else for that. It's true also in housing. There are experts, CHA and other folks could handle this better than the city's other interests on providing all of the goods and services that the city does. So there is an attempt to suggest, and I support this, that we ought to transfer the authority and some of the operation of the administration and so on to another entity besides the city, just maintaining the administrative capacity to deal with the land trust. So that's the land trust issue. You mentioned something else, and I'm not terribly shy about talking about some controversial issues. And this one, in fact, got one of my colleagues, Ian Thomas, in a little bit of difficulty a couple of years back. But it has to do with the notion of inclusionary zoning. You mentioned affordability when it comes to the private sector. and whether or not we have too much capacity for $400,000 to $500,000 homes and not very much capacity for $100,000 or $200,000 homes, whatever affordability is at this point. But lots of places, a bit more progressive even perhaps than we are, have been talking about this notion of inclusionary zoning. And what that means is, it started in the East Coast. I think it started in Virginia. What it means is that you offer the developers some incentives. Now, this is not a mandatory approach or anything, because that, we know about all of those mandatory issues, whether it comes to COVID or anything else. But you offer some of the developers incentives for density bonuses and for making some of the projects that large projects, subdivisions and so on, to include a range of affordable housing that goes along with some of the housing that they would prefer to do. That is the stuff that's $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. It is a challenge, but it is a potential solution to mixed development, which is the goal of lots of smart growth and lots of other folks. But it also allows a mix of affordability within the context of development in general. So I think that's an idea that I certainly would like to advocate for, and find if there is enough community support to encourage us to try and put some solutions in place.
It's Mari or Nancy that's next.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I'll be quick. I don't know how well my audio works here. Carl, I'd love to talk with you sometime about the trash situation, because me and Overly have done all of the above. And I'd like to share with you some of the pros and cons. I'm one of those elderly people who's having a great deal of difficulty with these roll carts, even though I'm in pretty good shape, because I have such a huge driveway and icy and snowy stuff. But anyway, also the idea of what Overly did was, when we went private, we gave up our landfill, and that then puts you over a barrel, because you never have any options again, because you can never afford to reopen a landfill.
Yeah, you're right. And I hear from a lot of folks that are a little reluctant to make this decision for some of those reasons. I mean, I'm agnostic. My driveway is not that long. I could go with a roll car to the bag. I sort of like the bags, but I don't like the service that we've gotten from the contract with the fire. I mean, they didn't make the bags available, and some people complain about the quality. I've never had a problem with that, but I don't go around trying to rip the strings off the top of these things. I think some people do, but there were lots of issues with that. And just a bit of information: the extra bags, the rolls of 5 that you pay, I think it's $10 for the extra bags, so that you can have bags. $1.37 of that is for the landfill, for extra cells or the maintenance of the landfill. 33 cents of that is for the folks that pick up the trash. And we, not only have we increased all hires in the city to be a $15 minimum wage, but we've given ad pay to some of those folks. Some of them are making, I mean, this is not a lot of money, obviously. We're long overdue for giving it to them, $20 to $22 an hour. And we have some issues with commercial driver's licenses and so on. But at any rate, it's 33 cents to pick up that bag of trash, right? And it's only 30 cents for the bag. That's the $2 that for each one of those bags that you're talking about. So, and people can put out as many of those bags as they want, just like they always did. The problem is that we have to pay as you throw, so we can maintain the landfill and maintain those other. And like I suggested before, when you privatize this, you lose not only do you lose the landfill, but you lose the ability to set the rates. And frankly, our rates for trash pickup are very competitive. And I almost guarantee you that if we privatized, at a minimum, your rates would double. I don't. So.
Well, and there are just lots of issues there, but the key to this whole thing is communication, because people never understand why it is you're doing what you're doing. And you're lucky in that Columbia, you have media who will help with the communication and promotion, whatever you do, so that at least maybe people will know. But there are lots of issues to be looked at there.
All right, you know, and to be honest with you, communication is always paramount. I mean, that's the thing that we struggle with the most. I mean, I mentioned before, one of the soup du jour issues is going to be ARPA funding, you know, and the first tranche and the second tranche and all of that stuff and the decisions we've made and what we're planning on doing. And most of the recent work session that we had with all of that was all about that very issue. How is it that we communicate with the public in order, whether it's, you know, red dots that we put on a board or so on, for them to tell us what it is that we all want to focus on, and then follow up with that to make sure that people understand what the decisions that we're making are all about. It's a huge challenge, and it's where we invest a lot of time thinking about it. Am I supposed to call on folks? I don't
Am I
want to call
good,
on.
Kathy, to go next?
Yeah.
I'll just forge ahead. My question, and I'm surprised Wynn hasn't already asked this, so I'll ask it for her, is about your vision for the city's energy future.
Yeah. Oh, God knows. You know, I served for about 13 years on the Environment Energy Commission. It was an interesting, when I was first appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission, that was one of my additional tasks, if you will. And when I got there in 1999, it was a dysfunctional group. I mean, it was just amazing what was going on. And meanwhile, we accomplished quite a bit, I thought, in those years. Outdoor lighting and was a thing that took 7 years in that group. And the initial renewable energy commitment I worked with Ken Midkiff early in the 2000s to design some of that stuff. I think, you know, now that we have the commission and the reports and so on with climate change and and they're doing yeoman's work when it comes to all of this stuff. Our commitment to renewable energy, and their last recommendation was to go 100% renewable and to move that timeline up. I absolutely support that. You know, I wish there was a way to cancel some of the contracts that we made with, I think it was Prairie State or whatever in Illinois. There were 45-year contracts that were made by the city council in the very early 2000s. There was a good deal of conversation about taking penalties to try and cancel some of those contracts. Those penalties would be probably prohibitive to do. So some of this is just going to take some time. But the idea of solar and wind power in this community, and even geothermal for that matter, for heat pumps, is a real possibility. And we do need to be climate change is a huge priority here. I mean, we have lots of other political problems, and we talk about it all the time, politics-wise. City council is not a political body, but certainly climate change affects all of us, and it is a huge priority. And we need to be aggressive when it comes to electric vehicles. That affects transportation and buses and everything else. And the ability for people to put solar panels and harvest wind if they want on their own individual homes, and if they have excess energy, to sell it back to the city, if you will. We need to pursue these ideas amidst all kinds of other problems that we have, but we need to be pretty aggressive on that. And I'm sure Wynn would smile at, because we've said a lot. We've given a lot of lip service to this, you know, over the years about it, and we've accomplished quite a bit. but we're still reaching a tipping point that it's going to be all for naught if we don't get seriously aggressive about some of this and start advancing this agenda that's going to affect all of the decisions we make in the future.
Well, that's it. As a follow-up to that, will you support the 100% by
I will. Yes.
2030?
Yes.
goal? Thank you. Great.
David Mallory?
Yes, I want to switch back real quick to the trash issue. I read that we have where each household is allowed 2 bags a week. And Carol and I use 1 bag a week at most. And sometimes during the winter when it's cold enough, it's not going to start stinking too bad. Yeah, trash bag's only half full. We just wait. And so we use less than a bag a week during the winter. I wondered, is there anything perhaps in the future, maybe it's already set up through some nonprofit, a clearinghouse of sorts for extra bags for low income people who feel like, oh, they may have a big family, they use extra bags, but to go out and spend $2 or $3 or $4, whatever the bag rate is for the extras, some way to get those out to the people. Are you aware of anything like that?
I'm aware of a discussion about it.
Okay.
We haven't made any decisions when it comes to that. I'm kind of surprised that there isn't a bit of a black market. To give you some numbers on this, the reason that the city came up with 2 bags per household as a part of the rate structure that we have for trash had to do with the fact that they took a survey, and the survey yielded 1.6 bags of trash per household. So they went a little bit further and they tried to give 2. Now you can put as many bags out as you want. You just have to pay $2 extra for each of the other bags. And this pay-as-you-throw system is vitally important to sustainability, not only for the landfill, but everything else. But you're right. I mean, my own habits, Mari and I's habits here, usually it's a bag or less. It doesn't even weigh 50 pounds. And by the way, that 50 pounds was also designed to avoid workers' compensation issues, because people used to stuff these bags with 80 pounds worth of, or whatever, and then they break and the animals got into them and everything else. So the trash collectors have appreciated the fact that we've reduced. But what it has done is it shifted the cost to folks who throw more trash. Now, a normal person would think, well, that sounds like a pretty reasonable idea. I mean, the more you throw, the more you ought to pay. And yet we get tremendous complaints from somebody like a business that deals with disposable diapers, for example, that they're just doing childcare. And they have a huge number, or large families that have lots of these issues. I understand it. I get that. And maybe there ought to be something that we can do, not only for the excess bags that other people use, but some sort of potential subsidy for the underserved, for those kinds of issues where they do have a little bit larger family. I think all of those are fertile ideas. The city council, and may I remind you, 1 vote, each city council member is 1 vote. And to do anything, it takes 4. So regardless of what my position is, unless I can get 3 other people to decide to do it, I probably will get blamed for it not failing. I mean, that's just nature of the beast. But those are fertile ideas that I think we continue to discuss them. And I think obviously trash is going to be a big issue. And whether we go to another system or whether we retain the same system, there are going to have to be tweaks that solve some of the problems that we still have.
Carl, thank you very much. We really appreciate learning so much more about you and your views. And we need to move to having the spotlight on poll workers.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I just want just one comment, and that is thank you again for anyone who has contributed to my campaign. You can go to my website. It's www.scalaforcouncil.org. You can continue to contribute there if you would like. It's got more information and so on. I'll be sending out some mailers before the end of the month. There are those other lists that I'll give to Pam for the forums and so on, if somebody wants to do that. So, all of this is all about Some of it's about experience, some of it's about a better quality of life in Columbia in general. I will say at the outset, experienced leadership matters, I think. And I want to thank you in advance for always supporting me and moving forward so that we can, make this an even better place to live. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Karl, for being here today. We've got a couple of the hands, but before we hit those, I would like to just take a minute. We have logged in as Brianna Lennon is Ragini Algole. Did I get that right? We're going to let her address us just for a few minutes from the Boone County Clerk's office. So Ragini, I'll let you take it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. So I wanted to log on today to talk to you all about being a poll worker. As we have a pretty busy election season ahead of us this year. We have 3 elections, April municipal, the August primary, and the November midterms. What really makes our elections possible is poll workers, honestly. Because in Missouri, the laws relating to mail ballots and absentee voting are pretty strict. We have a lot of voters who have no other option but to go to their polling place on election day and vote on election day. So that's why we need to have so many polling places staffed by so many poll workers in order to actually pull off the election. A lot of people don't know this, but Missouri law requires that polling places be staffed by a balanced number of poll workers from the major political parties in Missouri. So that's Democrat and Republican. So we can't just have anyone really, we have to have that balanced number from both of the parties. And so poll workers can also identify as a third party or as independent, but it still has to be, the major balance has to be between the 2 major political parties. So that's really our issue, is getting enough poll workers who are of the correct parties to balance out all of our polling places. And so that's why I'm making, an appeal to you all today. Being a poll worker, it's a pretty long day. They start work around 5 a.m. or so. That's when you report to your assigned polling place on election day, and then they work the entire day until after the polls close at 7 p.m. They leave around 8 to 9 p.m., just depending on how long it takes to close. So it's about, 15 to 17 hours, but that's not to say it's a pretty exciting, engaging day, honestly. It's a lot of interaction with voters, especially when it's a bigger election like the midterms coming up in November. It's pretty nonstop. You get the day passes pretty quickly because you get a lot of activity throughout the day. And it's just a really great way to get directly involved with the process. A lot of poll workers report that after working the polls, they really understand more of what goes into the election and how much oversight there really is over an election. So a lot of our election day tasks at the polls are done in bipartisan teams. So it'll be like 2 poll workers from different political parties who will do things together. And that makes sure there is always like this chain of custody and always oversight over everything, like all the ballots, all the security, all the machines. So that's really a good way to see exactly how the process works in Boone County specifically. So I wanted to take this opportunity to let you all know we are actively recruiting poll workers for all 3 elections this year. I'll give you our website address, and I'm sure that's gone out already. That's where you can apply to be a poll worker. And I wanted to open it up and see if anyone had any questions about being a poll worker or any of the duties, the roles and responsibilities involved.
Hi, this is Shaman Schwak. I have a question about poll working.
Yeah.
I am running for office and will be on the August and the November. I will be on the August ballot. But can I work on the April ballot?
Yes.
Like my name won't be on there. Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I was
absolutely. And also, even if you are on the ballot for a particular election, you can still vote in a precinct where you aren't on the ballot. So that doesn't really apply if you're on the ballot countywide, but say if you're running for 3rd Ward, for example, you can work as a poll worker in a ward where you're not on the ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Pam, your hand is up. did you have something you wanted to share? You're muted though.
You're muted, Pam.
Oh, she took her hand down and left her mute up. So-
I do want to say that
Okay.
the link to find out and to apply to be a poll worker is in our announcements and will go out to everyone as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Appreciate you reminding us of that. And I think Winnie was waving. I don't know if she was waving or wanted to say something. Winifred? No, I don't see it now.
Oh, I think
she
she's
had slipped away. Maybe she was saying bye.
Can I ask a
All
quick
right.
question? Could
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Sure, go ahead, Sue.
also mention how much the pay is?
Yes, that's a good point. Yes, so poll workers are
Oh.
paid a base rate of $165 for working election day, and then they also receive additional pay for
Wow.
attending a training session and other duties like helping to set up the poll. If you're a supervisor, you make more. But the base rate is 165.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wiley, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, David. Is there any option at all for part-time days? Can a poll worker work half day, for example?
So we have considered that, Brianna, the county clerk, has considered that as an option. However, the problem with that is we still have to maintain the balance. So we've run into issues in the past where the second shift doesn't show up, or the second shift, the parties get off balance. And so we can't legally have that at the polling place. Like we still have to have the party balance. So it just introduced a lot of problems where we would have to get double the number of poll workers that we need already. So as of now, we don't have the option to do half days. It is a full day, but that's something we might consider in the future if we get enough people. But right now it's really just hard enough to get the minimum number of people, honestly.
Ragini, do you have, can you tell us how many people you need for the April election?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are looking, so we have 42 polling places total for the April election. Each polling place is ideally staffed by 4 to 6 poll workers. So right now we're looking at around 200 to 250 that we need for the April election. Hopefully we will meet that. We typically send out a work request, and we've requested a lot of people this time. The main issue is like in the beginning, now we're about 6 weeks out from the election, so it's looking good now, but a lot of people have, like, we have a lot of last minute dropouts, we have a lot of last minute emergencies, so that is what makes our numbers tight. So having a pool of people who, like a reserve pool, is also really important for us.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and filling us in. And hopefully some of the rest of us will have some time to devote to that. So go to the, if you can stick, Ragini, if you maybe put the website out, never mind, I'm sorry. Pam just reminded me, it's going to be in the announcements that goes out to everyone. So look at the announcements that Mara is going to send out for the website to go to sign up. Anyone have anything else for the good of the order? About time is up. If not, I will remind you that next week we're having our third ward city council. Sue, you have something?
Just a quick thing. Do you have an alternate list? I mean, some of us are a little reluctant to think in terms of that many hours.
Yeah,
if you decide you want an alternate that might even consider part-time, would you think about that?
Yeah. So if you would want to be considered as like a backup or a fill-in or something like that, the website, or you can fill out an application and make a note of that. There's a comment section, or you can send me an email anytime to let me know of your interest in that. I do try to maintain a backup list. It's just most of the time we end up using all of them because we have last minute dropouts and last minute cancellations. So that's the main thing. But I will I'll send, I think my email address might already be on the list, but I will send it anyway. And yeah, feel free to reach out anytime if you're willing to be an alternate or a backup.
There you go, Wendy. Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
I don't know what's happened to my picture. I look like I'm in jail, but I was wondering if there's a training session for the poll workers.
Yes, there is. So if you have not served previously as a poll worker in Boone County, we require you to attend one training session. It's about 2 to 3 hours long, and it covers how to use our voting equipment and how to process voters. There are multiple training session options offered throughout the month of March for the April election. So we have, the sessions are run by trainers who are basically experienced poll worker supervisors who have been working for many elections.
All right, yes, fourth ward next week, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We have our guest for next week. Yeah, yes, Winnie? Yes, thank you. All right, well, does anyone have anything else we need to share or any other last minute questions before we close the meeting? I'm not seeing any, so appreciate you all being here. Oh, Winnie? I'm sorry, I thought someone said something.
I forgot to raise my hand. This is Kathy Jensen.
Oh, yes, Kathy.
I just want to ask Ragini if do you have to recruit then another whole crew of people for the August and November elections, or do you try to use the same?
We try to use the same. So what we do right now is our database. We have a pool of poll workers who have worked, elections for the past like 20 years. And every time we request that we send out our work request, we send it to a big pool. So right now I've sent the request to everyone who's worked since the November 2020 election, which was obviously a pretty big pool of people. So yes, we do use the same people. A lot of our poll workers are regulars. So they work David Mallory, Kevin Carroll are two of them. They work, most every election. So yes, a lot of them repeat from election to election.
Carol just pointed out, if someone has not served before and they want to get an idea of what it's like, there's a recording on the Boone County Clerk's website of the training. So you can go over that, at least you still want to go and we'll need to go through the training, but that'll give you an idea and say, oh, okay, I can handle this. So just something.
Yeah. And honestly, a lot of it sounds like a daunting task, but the supervisors are very well trained in how to run the polling places. And then we never leave any steps, even for the supervisors, we never leave anything up to memory. We have step-by-step checklists on how to do literally every election task at the polling place. So everything is very regimented, just because they serve as the legal record of the election. So everything is like, you must follow this step by step. So it's a pretty simple thing to learn, honestly.
All right. Thank you again, Ragini, and thanks, Karl, for being here. So I'll applaud both of y'all. Thank you. Look forward to seeing everyone back next Friday if you can make it. See y'all then. Have a great week.